What's going on, Facebook? I hope everyone's having a wonderful Wednesday evening. I'm just getting ready to turn in for the day. I got the gym tomorrow. I train Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And I don't know if you've seen me on video a little bit. I've lost some weight. I shed about 15 pounds in the last month and a half, and I'm still going. Need to, get fit, be strong, and be healthy. I wanted to share some business lessons that I learned this year. And hopefully, these, mistakes or, pieces of knowledge I learned can be helpful to some people here. So we scaled our business from 3 million last year to almost 10 million this year. And there was a lot of learning lessons involved with that. One of them, I left probably about 1.5 million on the table due to scaling too quickly and just hiring way too many people and just spending way too much on software and just other stupid stuff which wasn't necessary. So the first thing I wanted to share with you is whether you're making 1 million a year or 10 million a year or beyond, to know your finances at all times. So one of the things that I changed was I get a daily, and I learned this from Grant Cardone, I get a daily account ledger from about 15 different accounts. So multiple business accounts, multiple credit cards, all my personal accounts, all my personal credit cards, my wife's credit card. Got to see what she's spending. Here, let me take these AirPods out. I don't even need them in. So knowing your finances at all times is really, really important. Getting that balance sheet every day. Maybe you don't have a finance team that can provide that for you, but just get it yourself. It could only should only take you 5-10 minutes. Most of you probably don't have 15 accounts that you're looking at. But yeah, knowing your finances every day, it's been a big thing that I'm focusing on now, to really know where the money's at. There's so much coming in and out on a daily basis. It's really helpful to know. The second thing I wanted to share, something I learned from Alex Becker, something I've known, having talked to your customers and ruthlessly implement every single thing within reason that they suggest. And a lot of the time it's really easy to implement what they want. So really just talking with them and then making sure that you ruthlessly implement whatever they say. It'll change everything inside your business. One of the things that I've done many times in my life, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this, was going into a relationship with somebody that they knew wasn't right. You start to kind of see flags and warning signs, in the relationship, and you kind of ignore it, and then you keep enduring it. So one of the lessons that I learned this year was not to compromise on my morals or integrity. So if I see any warning signs in the future, with key employees, to just let them go from the company immediately. So that was probably one of the biggest lessons that came at the end of the year. Life's too short, guys. We spend most of our time working, right? So life is too short to not work with people that you don't like and respect. I did a pretty big cleansing inside my company recently, and I laid off about 40% of our people. We were at around 300 head count. Now we're around 180. And I haven't noticed really any change in the operation, right? One of the big parts of who I got rid of was people that, listen, I didn't even know half of them. When you have 300 employees, it's hard to know them. But there's some people that I just didn't like, didn't jive with, and I didn't respect. So I made sure that I called them as part of that. So now, I really want to make sure that people I'm around, especially that I'm communicating with, I really like and respect. I think that's a really small litmus test for people that you hire. Dmitry Lipinski taught me this one earlier. It was great. I actually talked to him for 20 minutes on the phone. He said to brag with results, not wealth. And I'm paraphrasing that. He didn't say that exactly. I think anyone that comes into, a lot, not anyone, a lot of people, and depending on your personality type, when you come into an enormous sum of money, I call it the new money phase. And that's what happened to me about 4 years ago. I was always making great cash, but, about 4 years ago, I was like, wow, like this is an enormous sum of money. I think there's a tendency to show off. Some people buy new cars, some people buy new clothes, some people go on expensive trips, some people buy jewelry, some people buy whatever, artwork, and that's okay, right? But I think that when you're trying to sell, I've made millions off social media, and I think that actually probably north of 10 million off social media at this point. This year alone, we did several million on social media. But I think that, the audience that you want to attract, right? I've sold to, people with one sales rep. I've sold to people with 20 sales reps. I've sold to people with 50 sales reps. I've sold to people with hundreds of sales reps. I think that, in business, it's easier to sell a higher ticket item than a bunch of lower ticket items. So I think that, the audience now that I really want to resonate, and again, Dmitry Lipinski helped me with this, I think that the audience that I want to resonate with doesn't care about flashy things, right? And maybe they went through that phase or didn't go through that phase themselves, and that's fine. But when you want to sell to wealthy people, to articulate people, the presentation is a lot different than if you want to sell, to up and coming people, right? So he made me really think, about how I brag and how I show myself. So I really want to brag with results and not wealth. I think that was really, a really, really good lesson from Dimitri. So I appreciate that one. Have clear, the next thing, I have some notes that I'm reading from. You guys can't see it, but having clearly defined processes inside your business. So the processes must be above people. So a lot of people don't have processes in place. And then what happens when they lose key people? Then the processes go out the window, right? So we have hundreds of processes in place. Listen, we're not perfect. I don't think any business is. But we really, when we create a process, I always instruct everyone to create a process that somebody can duplicate. So a lot of the time people will show me SOPs. I say, okay, that's a great first effort, but what does all of this mean? So I actually go through it with them line by line, and even I couldn't execute it. And I built 80% of the systems inside the business. So I say back to the drawing table. So having clearly defined processes that regardless of who's in that role can execute goes a long way for business. Another thing too is using AI to automate everything. So we have a pretty decent sized development team, and we're literally going through the company right now and understanding our highest leverage AI automation points. You're going to see a huge, excuse me, you're going to see a huge AI surge over the next few years, and those who don't adopt AI today will be left in the dust. So I'd estimate, a lot of you guys are watching this on roofing companies or roofers, I'd estimate about 50% of what you do right now could be automated. So using AI to automate everything, this is an initiative that I took about a year ago inside our company. Every single day inside our company, I would say AI is saving anywhere from 50 to 150 man hours a day, right? So we're talking, anywhere from 15 to 25 bucks an hour. At the lower end, that's $1,000, but at the high end, it's several $1,000s a day that we're saving, with repetitive tasks or quality control processes. Like inside our call center, we have 3 different large language models that we use to score the calls. And we've pretty much eliminated any manual process inside the quality control. So, that's just one example. There's so much stuff in automation that AI can do that will completely change your business. So using AI to automate everything. This is more for the founders and people that have leverage. So guys, that people that own businesses that have at least, 20, 30 employees, right? Really understanding where your time is going. And I'm just pulling up something in the background here. Really understanding where your time's going and focusing on tasks, that are going to change the business. For example, planning and organizing your day, building sales funnels and webinars, delegating complex tasks, creating judging tests and experiments. I mean, these are some of the lower value of the higher value tasks, but if you want to get into like super high value tasks, creating and improving your products, creating, improving your offers, improving your value proposition, negotiating major deals, hiring and firing team members, establishing values and culture. And if you want to get into the highest leverage tasks, capital allocation decisions, salary and incentive decisions, restructuring decisions, establishing long-term partnerships, architecting systems and machines. So, what separates, a $3 million a year business owner and an 8-figure or 9-figure business owner is really how they spend their time. And the ultra successful business owners are more on that higher end of the spectrum in terms of value tasks. So keep that in mind. It's really about these high value tasks. Again, I left I burnt probably around 1.5 million this year. That I was doing some back of the napkin math with a couple people on my finance team, and we are just looking at some stuff. We won't have our full report till end of the year, but I estimate I burned around 1.5 million. So that was fun. Not, which brings me to my next statement. Keeping costs low. Okay. What we did, I mean, right now we're spending around $100,000 a month on our software stack. So we have data, VoIP costs, Zoom, Slack, HRIS. I literally have like 50 tools inside my software stack. Just the development team alone has about 20 different tools. So what we discovered was that you can actually negotiate anywhere from 20 to 40% off your monthly price. Some of our software we use, Web Work Tracker, we actually have 50% off that. So you can keep your costs low and negotiate on every software that you use. And almost every vendor was willing to dramatically lower our prices for them. So that's huge. This is a segue into my next thing, treating cash like it's oxygen. When you're making an enormous sum of money, you have a tendency to be a little bit looser with it if you're trying to scale rapidly with it. So again, leaving that 1.5 on the table, in retrospect, now that I did a complete kind of audit in the business, culled about 40% of people, got it down to around 180 employees, got our software costs down a lot too. I realized how much waste there was. For instance, we were spending an extra $2,000 a month on Zoom for some extra storage and licenses that we didn't use. We were spending an extra $500 a month on Slack and a whole bunch of stuff. We were wasting tens of thousands of dollars a month just on software. Again, I don't know if a lot of people can kind of relate at this level, but at whatever level you're at, you can have some control over these costs. And if you're a good steward of money at $500,000 a year, $1 million a year, $3 million a year, when you scale to $10 million a year, you're going to take those same principles and just succeed, at keeping your costs low. I have a very wealthy friend, and he's so cheap he'd pinch a penny to make it squeal. He wears old used clothes, he doesn't care, and he's worth north of 10 million. He won't tell me. He does quite well. But long story short, his approach, to being very practical with costs, right, has done and served him well. So, leading me to my next one. When you hire people, you have to put them in a box and give them three key objectives on a 1 month plan, measured to complete. Okay. And if they don't, replace them. So I've done this a million times with middle management and executives. I've hired them and I've said, hey, go to work, do what you're best at. Then 3 months later, I'm like, what do we have? I'm like, well, we got nothing. And I'm like, what? And then 6 months happen, we got nothing. Okay, bye. I've wasted tens of thousands of dollars on you. It's over, right? But who's to blame at the end of the day? Myself, HR, other managers, right? What is the whole goal of a 30, 60, 90-day plan for a new employee onboarding? So once you give them that box, you have a very tangible measurement for them so that you can measure what success looks like. I think a lot of people make that mistake when they hire people. They expect miracles to happen. I know I have. But if you haven't told them the miracle that you expect them to produce, they will never produce it. So really, really important. Knowing your numbers at all times. Each department should have various KPIs and metrics that it upholds to. You should know your cost per acquisition for your customers. You should know your cost per fulfillment for the customers of a roofing company. How much does it cost to get a customer? How much does it cost for materials, labor, and everything to complete the job? And then obviously your gross operating costs, insurance, office costs, vehicle costs, and all that other fun stuff. Really knowing those numbers has been a gigantic game changer for us. So up until recently, our cost per appointment was dramatically high because we scaled dramatically. And as a result of tweaking our system, we were able to reduce our internal cost per appointment by almost 40%, dramatically, increasing our profitability just because we decided to know our numbers. Right? So knowing your numbers is the difference between having a really great end of the year or being like me right now where I lost 1.5 million. I mean, it was still have a ton of money, but I would have had 1.5 million extra, right? Which is like, oh no, I'm missing 1.5. The good news is I have an ambitious plan next year to make 10 million profit. So all the lessons that I'm sharing with you, hopefully they can help you on your journey to complete this year and next year. So there's some good lessons, okay? Everyone should time block their day, okay? So I time block my day. I'm ruthless with my time when I'm on, and I'm on about 95% of the time. I'm ruthless with my time. I have my phone on silent. I don't allow anyone to reach me. My assistant responds to my emails. I have an assistant, a work assistant, so she's helping me with everything in work. And then I have a real life assistant who does everything around my house and, takes my cars to the shop and gets tires on and, takes the car to the dealership, whatever that looks like, right? So I have two assistants that are helping me and saving me an enormous amount of time. Getting people to prepay as much as possible. Again, we've tried, on credit and, it works pretty good most of the time, but then sometimes people don't pay their bills, right? So try to secure, whatever business you might be in, try to secure as much of a payment upfront as possible. And that's ultimately going to help your cash flow and your account receivable. So getting people to prepay as much as possible. Now, here's kind of a bonus thing that's made me millions is going to the people that know your audience, right? So let's say you're a roofing company and you want to sell a whole neighborhood. Well, you would go to the HOA director and say, hey, how can I offer you value? What are you looking for? Here's some liquor. Here's some tickets here. How can I be your best friend? You want me to take out your trash for you for the week? These are, kind of silly, but understanding what that person needs in their life and then offering them that tremendous value and then just giving to them. And then one day they will naturally give back. So that's something that's made me millions of dollars. I've tried to help, people and just give them so much freaking value that they just naturally just reciprocate and help me. So, excuse me, this is kind of a bonus thing, right? But you can either sell one to one or you can sell one to many, and who can introduce you to the many is the people that control your audience. So that's kind of a bonus thing, a little bit of thinking deep, thinking bigger here, right? It's something, that strategy that I've used for about 7 years. Something I've learned from previous mentors is who controls the audience, provide them so much value, help them with whatever they want, and then they will naturally feel inclined to help you. And that's great. So I should probably drink some water. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video about business lessons that I've learned this year. Write in the comments some business lessons that you learned this year, and let's see what you got. And I'd love to learn from you guys. And I hope everyone enjoys their Thanksgiving and has a wonderful time with their family and friends. And thanks for watching the video. Take care.